Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is meant to be a very basic introduction to Ansible. It is not meant to go that in depth yet. It is meant to just scratch the surface on how to utilize it, not go in depth on how powerful it is. Although I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you already know you want to use Ansible and what you want to use it for, so you might already have some kind of idea. I will be streaming over on Twitch every Monday and Wednesday, different Ansible related videos. We'll be going over different modules and different tips and tricks. So we will be going in depth if you continue to follow the series. Follow me over there on Twitch, the_pseudo3. Follow me on YouTube and follow me on Twitter, the pseudo3, no underscore, for more updates. Thanks for watching. All right, I think we're good here. All right, so welcome to my first stream, everyone. This is an intro to Ansible, right? So basic how to use Ansible, the basic setup of the basic components, right? How to write a playbook, a basic playbook, the components of that playbook, the tasks, the modules, variables, inventory setup, how to install Ansible, right? Very basic. And then in future streams and future videos, I'm gonna go over how to do more complicated stuff, right? We'll go over looping, we'll go over conditionals, we'll go over other things besides the basics right now. So for the most part, we're just going to go over the basic documentation. We're going to follow that for the install process, and then I'll kind of trail off a little bit. So, and if you don't know what Ansible is, it's a DevOps automation configuration tool. So if we've got a lot of servers we want to configure at once, or maybe even launch a lot of servers at once, we can use Ansible to perform that. Similar to Terraform, but not exactly the same. So let's get into it. So as you can see on screen, right, my Visual Studio Code, I have a couple different servers here, right? These are Raspberry Pis in my house. And we're gonna go over the install first. So I've got the install instructions pulled up here. So installing Ansible. And I think it's important before we go over exactly, how to install, a little bit of the architecture for Ansible. So when it comes to Ansible, we have some prerequisites. We have control node requirements and we have manage node requirements. So we have a control node, which is where your playbooks, Ansible we configure the things we want to do in what's called a playbook. And we store those playbooks on our control node, or we can store them in an SCM system, source code management, such as GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. And we can pull those down to the control node at the runtime, and we can use that to configure our managed nodes. And the managed nodes are the nodes you identify in an inventory within Ansible, and you say, I would like to run these playbooks against these managed nodes. So if we go, I'm specifically going to be installing on an Ubuntu system. All of these hosts right here are Ubuntu operating systems. So I'm going to go to the installing on Ubuntu section here, and it's super simple. There's multiple ways you can install Ansible. You can use the Python method where you do a pip install. You can build from source, or you can use the package manager for your system if that's available. But let me first get into my management node here. I'm going to connect in this window. All right, opening remote connection. Seems to be running a little slow. Now for those, if you're curious, I am using the Remote Explorer extension in Visual Studio, right here on the left. You can install this plugin. You can define all your different connections. You can use a key file or a password like I just did. And then you can remotely connect to a host that way. And you can even open files on the remote host that you're connected to in Visual Studio. So it's pretty handy for editing files on a remote host. But now let's follow these instructions here. So first I'm going to do a sudo apt update. So sudo apt update. And this is just going to make sure I have the latest and greatest pulled in from the repository for Ubuntu. back to the browser real quick, and we're going to do it. I guess we have to install an apt install software properties comment, so I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Now, primarily throughout my career, I've installed this on Red Hat based operating systems. Oh, I didn't copy that all the way. All right, that's done. Go ahead and paste that. Sudo. But a NGINX system is a NGINX system if you use them enough. I'm going to go ahead and add a repository. So what this is doing is adding the PPA Ansible repository. And then all we got to do is sudo apt install Ansible, like you would install anything else. It's going to go ahead and install. And if you look through the documentation here, actually, let's see, where do they talk about it? Right, they talk about control node requirements, and they mention Ansible Core 2.11 and Ansible 4.0. So the differences are Ansible Core installs. Ansible comes with what's called modules, and modules are, you can think of them like functions, and they all have their own arguments and parameters. So like, for instance, there's a copy module, which has certain, parameters that you want to copy. What file do you want to copy? Where is it? Where do you want to copy it to? And what permissions do you want it to have? Well, Ansible Core comes with the very core modules for controlling our operating system, right? Whether that be Windows or Linux. And Ansible 4.0 comes with a lot of those community-built modules that have been added over time. So one's bigger than the other. I would say if you're going for security, you want Ansible Core because you want the least surface of attack. But certainly, if you're looking for the most functionality, you want Ansible 4.0. And they both have Python as a dependency. And you can read about all those dependencies in here. So if you're running into some issues, if you're using your systems package manager, you shouldn't run into dependency issues. It should install Python for you. If we go back to the main, right? So Ansible is installed, and I can verify this if I do an Ansible -- version, right? And it's going to tell me what version of Ansible I have installed, and it's also going to tell me what version of Python that it's using. So if you have any question about what version of Python you might have on the machine when you install Ansible, this is how you're going to figure out which one Ansible is picking up, right? Because you can have multiple versions of Python installed on the same machine, and Ansible might be picking up the wrong one. But you also see when I did a -- version that it says config file equals etc ansible.config. So Ansible, if we open this up, right, etc ansible.config, we've got some basic things in here, such as, well, let me look for sudo, right? Sudo. All right, let me just go to the top here. So this configuration file is by default, everything in here is how Ansible is configured. So we've got an inventory, right? By default, this is if you run a Ansible playbook, if you run the command Ansible -playbook and you define your playbook and you don't define your own inventory, we'll go over inventories later. Ansible will by default look in this file for your inventory, and it will use the root user as the sudo user by default, unless you change this or specify it when you're at the command runtime. You can do other things in here. You can also edit, this. So you get the sudo user. You can edit your private key, the path to your private key, right? So if we look at private key file right here, right? You can see mine's already uncommented with the path to the private key file, and that's because I did install Ansible earlier before I removed it to show you guys how to install it. And I did configure connection using SSH keys that I've distributed to other hosts, right? If I didn't want to use SSH keys, there is an option to use passwords, and we'll go over that. So for now, we'll go ahead and we'll close this. All right. So what I want to do now is, you did see I did have multiple different hosts over here, right? So I'm going to be configuring these four as well during this entire thing. So I want to first distribute my key to these hosts. So I'm going to do it. If you're new to Ansible or Linux in general, and you want to know how to connect with SSH keys, here's how you would do it. So you would run it, whatever machine you're on, Windows or Linux, you would run an SSH-keygen, and it's going to generate a public and private key pair, and you can give it a name. I already had one named the default name IDRSA, so I'm going to overwrite it. You can give it a password, not required. I'm not going to give it a password, and now it gets put in this user's home directory in .ssh, idrsa.pub, and idrsa. Pub is the public key, obviously, and the idrsa is the private key. So what I need to do now is, if I want to connect remotely with Ansible to the rest of these hosts, I need to distribute this SSH key. So I'm going to do an ssh-copy-id. I'm going to specify I for the file, right? My home directory .ssh idrsa.pub. Make sure you copy the public key and not the private key, because if you copy the private key, you're going to have a bad time if somebody gets into your system, because they're going to have full access to everything. Then I have to specify the user on the host that I want to put this key on, and the host name, obviously. So it's worker 01. It's going to ask me to put in the password for that user, and I'm in, right? Well, I shouldn't say I'm in. Like, it brought me back to my host, but it says now try logging into machine with SSH, right? So I should be able to SSH Kate's admin at Kate's worker 01 without inputting a password. And there we have it. I'm in. So I'm going to go ahead and just distribute that to the other two, or actually other three, real quick. And let's do 3. And master 01. Yes, I would like to accept the fingerprint. Cool. So I've created an SSH key on this host, and I've distributed the public key of that private public key pair to the hosts that I want to connect Ansible with. That way I don't have to input a password every time I run the playbook. And just to verify, you want to make sure your ansible.config. You want to make sure the private key file line here specifies the location of your private key file. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Yeah. So I said you can do it with a password as well. So Ansible, right, when you want to go ahead and actually run the playbook, and we're still going to go over how to build a playbook, but to run the playbook, you're going to run an Ansible-playbook command, right? And if you don't have a key, right, you can specify -k, you can specify -u and the user you would like to connect with, and then -k, and then if you wanted to also specify the pseudo password, you could do -K, right? So as this reads, you're going to connect with the user, Kate's admin, and as soon as Ansible connects, it's going to prompt you for your SSH password. And then if you've specified Ansible in a task somewhere or a play that you would like it to become root sudo up to someone else, something else root, right? You could specify -K, and then it would then ask you for the sudo password at the same time it asks you for your SSH password. All right. So that's how to install Ansible. That's how the Ansible config works, right? So the different components, right? Actually, so I think what I want to do, right, to start, right, is I want to make a directory called Ansible here on the control node where my playbooks are going to be stored. So I've got a directory called Ansible, cd into that. And I'm going to open those files actually remotely. So you can edit these with Vim, Nano, however you want to edit them. but I'm actually going to go ahead and open this in Visual Studio Code because it's a lot easier to read, manage, and edit files this way. Don't get me wrong, I love Vim. I love VI. Visual Studio Code is better for some cases, you know? YAML formatting. Ask me for my password. What is going on? There we go. All right, so open up a terminal. All right, so I'm on my control node. I'm in the Ansible folder in the terminal, so we can see here. And I'm also got the Ansible folder open up on the left here. So different components of Ansible, right? So I think to start, right, we'll start with the playbook. All the files in Ansible are of a .yaml format, right? If you want Ansible to read the file, it's going to be in .yaml YAML or .yaml YML. Both are valid YAML formats. And the only thing you have to watch out for when using a YAML format is you have to watch out for white space, because it does care. It is white space dependent, the YAML format. If you have any extra spaces, extra tabs, Ansible's just not going to work. And errors, Ansible is not the best at error handling, right? You could have an additional space 5 lines down into a task, and it's going to tell you the first line of that task has an error when it doesn't. So just keep that in mind. So anyway, back to the structure of Ansible, right? So you have a playbook. You've written it to do certain things. And then I would say another basic component, major component, is going to be your inventory.yaml. Again, .yaml. You don't actually have to name the file .yaml either. You could specify 3 dashes at the top of a file, and that will indicate that it's a YAML file. Just a trick. So, I think I'll start with an inventory first, right? So an inventory in Ansible is a list of the hosts that you would like to connect to, right? So you see over here on the left, I've got Kate's worker 1, 2, 3, and Kate's master 1, right? So if I wanted to build a basic inventory, I would do Kate's worker 01, Kate's worker 02, Kate's worker 03, and Kate's master 01. And that would be a very basic, this would be a valid inventory. This would be a basic inventory. I could utilize this in a playbook, right? So then I'll come back to my playbook. And playbooks have a certain structure, right? It's a playbook because it's made up of different plays, right? So if you think about like any sport, football, right? For instance, they have different maneuvers, different plays they can have within a book, right? So if this was play 1, right? I would have a task 1. I wrote 2, task 2 and task 3 within play 1. And then I could have another play within the playbook, and it could have a different task 2 and a different task 3. Let's see. Each play, right, is going to have each play is going to start with at least this, right? So you're always going to have a name. This is play 1, right? And you want to be descriptive. What is this play trying to accomplish overall? What is the end goal of this play? You can get more specific within the tasks, right? And then you're always going to define hosts, and then you have to define a group of hosts that you would like to run against, or an individual host that you would like to run the playbook against, right? So if we go back to my inventory, I've got individual hosts here. They're not in any sort of group, just individual hosts. So if I wanted to run against Kate's worker 01, this is as basic as a play is ever going to get. You can't get any more basic. You can add stuff to this play, right? You can add gather facts no, you can add a variables file, you can add variables, you can add stuff to this play, but this is the smallest and most basic a play is ever going to get. And then after a play, right, in line, you can see that I'm right here in line with the play. I'm going to put tasks. And you can put other things here. There are, there's other things you can do. Ansible is large. You can put roles, pre-tasks, post-tasks. But generally, just starting out, this is how you're going to do it. And then you're going to specify the tasks that belong to this play, right? You're going to have a name. This is task 1. We ping, right? And then every task, you have to choose what module you want to use to run that task. And we can think of a module, again, like a function, right? It has certain parameters. So if I come over to the browser here, let's just say, I'll look up the copy module, right? No, we'll just look up the ping module, because that's the one we're going to use. Windows ping, Ansible built-in ping, right? So I know I want to ping in Ansible. I know whenever I want to write a task, just ping something. So I just start Googling how to ping, like module to ping in Ansible. And I get the ping module, Ansible built-in ping, So Ansible built-in ping. It's important to note, if it's a core module, all you have to define in the task to run a module is this last part here. You don't actually, you can put ansible.builtin.ping, or you can just put ping, right? And then I said a module is like a function. It has different parameters and arguments you can pass in, right? And well, these are it, right? So this, I guess this is kind of a bad example of that, parameters and arguments, because ping doesn't have a lot of things you can pass into it. But for instance, Ansible copy module, right? If we look at the copy module, which is used to copy files to and from different nodes, we have tons of parameters here, right? The destination, group, mode, all this good stuff, right? And it's laid out here in some examples, which is really nice. So copy module, and then the parameters for that module. So anyway, back to the ping module, right? So I have a play, and within this play, I'm starting to define my tasks. Oh, hit the mic. And I want to use the ping module. I just want to ping a host. And now I've finished this task, and I've written a playbook. So this playbook says, for the node, for the host, Kate's worker 01, do the ping module. So I saved that. Now I can run it. Ansible dash playbook. And I spelled Ansible wrong. Ansible dash playbook. So you remember earlier I said in the Ansible config, you can define your default inventory, but that can always be overridden on the command line at the time of running using the -i option. So as long as I specify the full path to my inventory file, which in this case it's in the same directory as the playbook, so I don't have to define the full path. I only need to define the file name, and then I need to define the playbook name, playbook.yaml, and I shouldn't need anything else because I'm connecting with an SSH key, not a password, and I am not doing anything that requires sudo privileges either, so I don't need to define a sudo password. So this should run and ping Kate's worker. So we have a play. This is play 1. Gathering facts. This is task 1 when we ping. Okay. So a little bit about, before we move on, what we're seeing here, right, in the command line. So we're seeing the play that we're executing, but after that we're seeing this task, gathering facts. And you notice up here we never defined a task called gathering facts. And that's because by default Ansible gathers facts for every host that it connects to. And what facts are is, let me see if I can pull it up over here. Facts, all right? What facts are in Ansible is they're different things about the host. So they're what IP address on what interface does it have, what kernel version is it running, what operating system is this, major, minor version, how many hard drives are installed, what are the names of those hard drives, what are the MAC, it gathers all of these things, right? So magic variables, Ansible facts, discovering variables, facts and magic variables, right? So if you look over here in the browser, these are a bunch of different facts that Ansible gathers during the gather facts task. And these are useful because you can actually define these as variables somewhere else within your playbook, within a template. And that makes it easier to, so for instance, if you wanted to assign, well, maybe you had a conditional and you only wanted to run that you only wanted to run certain tasks against certain hosts if they met a certain condition, such as if these hosts have this operating system, run this task. If not, skip it. So because these facts are gathered at runtime, you could define these as conditionals in your tasks and say, hey, only run this task if the Ansible facts distribution is CentOS, right? We'll go more into facts in another video. We can go pretty in depth with it, but for now, that's all you need to know. And then we have our task. Hey, this is task 1, we ping, and that's the name of the task, right? And it doesn't show you, there are ways to output the actual things that occurred in that task, but generally you're just gonna get an okay. You're gonna get an okay, a changed, an unreachable, a failed, skipped, or rescued, right? So okay means no change occurred. So for instance, if you have the copy module and you want to copy a file to the host, the first time you copy that file to that host, you're going to get it changed because that file did not exist and Ansible created that file. The next time you run the same thing with the same task with the same file, Ansible's going to say okay because Ansible is idempotent. Ansible knows if what it's trying to do has already been accomplished, and if it has, don't change it, don't do it, just go to the next task. All right, I'm back. Starbucks went right through me. All right, anyway, where was I? Yes, so I just went over what all this stuff in the command line meant. So this is honestly, I don't think you can get a playbook simpler than this, and I don't think you can get an inventory simpler than this. So now let's go in a little more in depth with each of these, right? So if we think about inventory, this is the simplest way you can do it, but it's not efficient, right? Because if I wanted to run this against K8's worker 02, K8's master 02, it would be very inefficient to try and call out all of my hosts up here in the host line. So what I could do instead is I can group my hosts. I can create what's called a host group in Ansible. And that's, you define that with the brackets and the name of the host group, right? So now all of these hosts underneath all belong to the all host group. So if I come back to my playbook and I define all, right? And I go ahead and run. Now I'm gonna hit all of the hosts in the all host group. My inventory is a little slow, probably because all the stuff I got going on my home network. And there we go. So we have children groups in Ansible. They're a way to cleanly divide and group things together, right? So if you've got a country group, so you've got some country, right? And it's split up into different regions, maybe east. Oh, I spelled east wrong. Maybe west. So you've got an east and a west group. So you've got a bunch of servers in a country, and those servers are split up between the east and west office. These are what are called children groups. And no, we don't sacrifice them. So I have an east group, and I have a west group. So I could define Kate's worker 01, one server in one group. So this is my server on the east office, Kate's worker 02, and my server on the west office. So because the host group country, I've defined the children that belong to it, east and west, and I have an east and west host group. When I go to run the playbook against country, it's going to run against all the children groups and all the hosts within those children groups that belong to the country host group. Boom. There we go. Let's make a new file here. So this is one way to do an inventory, right? Inventory 2, but there's another way to do an inventory. And there's really no wrong or right way. But this inventory that we just did is called an INI style format inventory. And this one's going to be called a YAML format inventory, right? So we would start with all. So all of our hosts. Boom, hosts. And all of our hosts would go into this host group, right? So I could have Kate's workers 01, Kate's worker 02, Kate's worker 03, right? I could create children. And we could be workers. So I could put all my workers in here. Oh, actually, so yeah, then I'll have Kate's master 01, hosts. So my children host to the all host group would be the workers, and those would be Kate's worker 01, Kate's worker 02, Kate's worker 03. And then I could have another children group called masters. And I'll define their host. That's Kate's master 01. So I can run the playbook against all, right? And that's gonna hit, oh, where's the playbook? All of them, all of the hosts. Wham, baity, bam. Boom. So I should hit all hosts. Oh, you know what? Actually, I messed that up. I'm still defining the old INI inventory. I want to define the new inventory. Now it only did Kate's master 1. It's important to note you have to put these colons here if you do the inventory in a YAML format, or you're going to be just as stumped as I just was. Because I do this all the time, and I always forget these colons for some reason. Now, we should run against all hosts. Yeah, see, now we're looking good. We're not getting a bunch of errors. Easy peasy. I get to see the troubleshooting in action. Reference old projects. What did I do that one time it worked? Yep. All right. So we hit all 4 of the hosts because we defined all, and in the YAML style inventory, all of these hosts, right? So now, because I've defined these children groups, if I define workers or masters, I'll only hit those. So just real quick, we'll go ahead and show that children group. So we'll do masters. We'll go ahead and run, and we should only hit the one master node. Boom, done. Only hit the master node. Easy peasy. All right, so I think for now we've got the inventory down, right? Now, real quick, let's go over variables, right? So variables in Ansible, they're a way to store, the value of something. So, and you can get that value, you can define that value yourself. You can get that value from a task you ran before. So say you have a task that checks for the existence of maybe a file, or a task that does something, and you want to grab that output and then take that output and use it as an input in something else. That's how we use variables. Or maybe you define an IP address that you want to put in a template, and you just want to be filled in by the IP address gathered by gather facts. You could use a variable that way. So I think to just the quickest way to go over variables is to just do one, right? So if I have a task, let's call it, oh man, echo a command, right? There's a module that you should stay away from as much as possible in Ansible, but it's not always avoidable. You should always use a module that has like a state definition, right? Like present or absent, right? So if you, for instance, the line and file module, it puts a line in a file. You can specify whether you want that line to be present or absent. So you're defining the state, how you want it to be. There's some modules that don't exist for what you're trying to do, so you're forced to use the shell or command module, and those aren't idempotent, so you want to stay away from them if you don't have to use them. But there's a way to make them idempotent, but we'll go over that in another video. So if I use the shell module, right, I could define a shell command in Linux. I could say echo hello world because everybody uses hello world. No, you know what? Echo. All right, this is gonna get a little tricky. So in Bash, when you're using the shell module and you're trying to echo a string into a file, or you're trying to echo a string, you have to put quotes around that string so it knows it's a string, right? In Ansible, you have to put quotes, single or double, around a variable you define in a task or a play, and it has to match all throughout the playbook. So if one task has double quotes around variables and one task has single quotes around variables, you're gonna get errors about mismatching quotes. So I'm gonna do single quotes because I'm already in double quotes for these bash string. And you start a variable and end a variable with squiggly brackets. So squiggly bracket, so actually single quote, squiggly bracket, my var for my variable. So Ansible's gonna echo my var. Let's put it into a file. Nah, let's just not put it in a file. Let's just use the debug option. So this is a special task option you can run. And with the debug option, what you're able to do is output the results of like a certain variable that you've registered before to the command line when Ansible runs, right? So let's see, we have -debug, and how did it go? How did it was super simple. I think it's just var. Oh yeah, you have to, what variable do you want to output? So result. So this is a valid variable name. Let's do standard out. I think that's a good one. So, but with this shell module, I have to register this output result. So I think this is gonna work. Yeah. So where does my var come from, right? There's multiple ways you can define my var. You could define my var up here within the play, right? So you could do, I think it's just var result. No, I don't think that one's valid. Anyway, okay, what are the most common ways? So what are the most common ways to define a variable in Ansible? So you can get them from gather facts. You can do group and host variables in the inventory. So for instance, if I go over to the inventory, I can define a variable for case worker 01. I can, so say, what was that? Was it my var? What did I put there? My var equals, God, what was the syntax for? I mean, I am all over the place today. I can't remember if it's a it can't be a colon because then it won't be able to read it. Then region foo tasks. Vars. In inventory. Host variables. Okay, it was just an equals. Okay, equals hello. All right, so if I take this playbook, I run it against case worker 01, assuming I got my syntax right, and I didn't. Debug. What doesn't it like? Conflicting action statements. Hang on a second. You get to learn with me. That's why it's called a live learn, right? Is this what I want? Oh yeah. Message. And I think that's it. Or was it just var? I think that, yep. Do the first inventory. Hey, it's running this time. So now let's go over this. I got hello, right? So what Ansible did is when it got to this task, when it hit shell echo, it saw, hey, there's a variable here called my var. I need to go get my var. Where can I get it from? Well, it's assigned to the host as a host variable, right? We have group variables, so we can define a group variable, which would be, so they're the same as host variables. They just get defined like this, right? So I would have country vars, and then I could say my var equals hello country. Make that a string. Right, and so now this same variable will be applied to all the hosts in the host group. Actually, let's cancel that. How did that get in there? And I need to define the country group. Did I mess it up? Country. I defined inventory too, didn't I? Yep. Okay. That's always fun. All right, cool beans. So I ran against country host group, where I defined variables for the country host group. So my var as hello country. So again, Ansible hit every host in the country group, which happened to be every host in the children groups, east and west, workers 01 and 02. And on each host, it echoed my var. It registered that result. So it replaced my var with the string hello country. It registered that as result, and then I debugged that using the debug module with the variable name result. So I registered as result, and I debugged result.standardout. And the .standardout is what's going to allow you to see it down here. Like if you don't put .standardout, the debug may not work properly, or you may not be able to use it in another task, like a future task, right? So it's just best practice to always do like a .standardout. All right, so I think, you know, so those are variables as far as they go. You know, I think you get a good gist of how variables work, right? It's not all encompassing, it's not perfect. We can also do, real quick, I can give you, let's put it all together now, right? So let's see if I can find it real quick. I bookmarked it the other day. I want to put it all together. Let's build a playbook to actually accomplish something, like give us an end result here. So other bookmarks, this is in the, no, where's my Kubernetes? Right here. Oop. It's not Kubernetes, but we'll go with it. That's not what I want. Did I not put it in there? No. All right, anyway, okay. Ubuntu NGINX, there we go, found it. All right, this is what I always like to use to tell, like once people are ready to write their first playbook and they feel comfortable enough to give it a go, this is what I like to use, right? It's simple, it's easy, and it introduces you to a couple of different concepts, right? So installing NGINX, right, on Ubuntu. So there is an optimal way to write a playbook, and I'm going to do a future video on, you know, efficiently writing a playbook and not just sitting down and throwing things against the screen until the shit sticks to the wall. But let's go ahead and clear this out, right? And I'm only going to want to do this on, let's say Kate's worker 03, and I hope it works because there's a lot of different things running on Kate's worker 03, but we'll find out. So you always want to start with, like, you know what you want to do. So I know I want to install NGINX and get it up and running, but you need to know what the steps are involved are, so you can go ahead and actually turn that into tasks. So it's like before you sit down and code a program, you have to diagram it out. You have to workflow it, right? What functions do I want? What do they want to accomplish? If this function doesn't work, what should it do? If this function works, what should it do? If there's a special handling thing that needs to be taken into account, what is it? And what way should that be handled? Right? It's like a flow chart. You know, I'm not a computer science student, so I don't know what they call those things, but it would help if I knew how to spell tasks. First task, right? So we know we need to install NGINX. How do we do that, right? Well, they tell us right here that we need to sudo apt update and sudo apt install NGINX. Okay, how do we do that with Ansible? Well, oh, I'm on the browser. Cool. Yep. We come over to Google and we look for an apt module. Oh, and I might help if I put Ansible there. All right. And this is going to give us, this is generally going to bring us to the Ansible module for whatever you just Googled. So Ansible has an apt module. So you can read through all this, or you can just simply scroll down to the examples and, oh, okay, cool. So we want to use the apt module. So we'll go back over here. So, oh, actually we want to install NGINX using the apt module. Name, which package do we want to install? So NGINX. And we saw they wanted us to do sudo apt update, but if I just put state latest, right? What that's going to do is it's going to do the update and grab the latest one. So you can do different states. You can do present, and this is going to make sure that it's not going to update it if it's already installed. Right, so to give you an example, if I define state present and NGINX version 1 is installed, it's going to keep version 1 installed and it's just going to skip over it. It's not going to install version 2 if version 2 is available. If I put state absent, right, it's going to check to see if NGINX is installed, and if it's not installed, it's not going to do anything, but if it is, it's going to remove it. If I put state latest, it's going to see if NGINX is installed or not. If it's not, it's going to install the latest one available. It's going to do an update. And if it is installed, it's going to see if it's the latest one available. And if it's not, it's going to update it. So when in doubt, always do latest. If that's, if you're trying to accomplish, hey, I want the latest one, do latest, right? And that's our first task. We're simply installing NGINX. So if we come back over to the instructions and then we're like, okay, I think I've got that one down. The next thing we have to do is we have to make a directory, right? So they want us to make a directory in var www called tutorial. All right, so we have to make directory var www tutorial, right? And then we need to know what module we want to use for this. So I already know what it is, but if I were to Google make a directory in Ansible module, if I could, I can't spell, I can't type, I can't do anything apparently. Right? How to create a directory? No, there we go. Ansible built-in file. So the file module is what you're going to use. You can use it to create files, and you can use it to create directories as well, right? So we come down to change ownership, give a symbolic link. You can use the file module to create links as well. Create directory if directory does not exist. So this is what I want, right? So I want the file module, and I want the parameter path. So for our www, I want to create tutorial, and what state, right? So this is where you define directory. So this is how you tell the file module to create a directory, and we can give it an owner, but we don't have to. We can give it a group, but we don't have to. If we don't, it's just going to take the permissions from its parent folder. We can choose a mode, and the mode's always going to be in a 4-octet syntax, just like this, in these single quotes, right? But again, we don't have to define a mode, right? So this is sufficient, right? So this is going to go ahead and create the directory. Then if I come back over to the browser, what do they want me to do next? Okay, they want me to create a file called index.html in that tutorial folder, and they want it to look just like this. So this is where the template module comes in, right? So create index.html in var www tutorial. Go back over here, and I spelled it wrong up here as well. Cool. So the template module, and this is one of my favorite modules because it simplifies a lot of things. If you're trying to do something with Ansible and you can use the template module for it, by all means, I encourage you to do so, right? So the template module, right? Ansible template module. Is one of my favorite modules. Basically, you can create a template, and you can pre-fill it, and Ansible will just copy that template, and it's in a .j2 format, a Jinja format, and it solves a lot of problems. Like you can put variables inside J2 templates, and Ansible will fill them in, right? So you're gonna see that in action right now. Anyway, so here's a couple of examples, right? So we have source and destination, and that's really all we're going to use right now because we don't need group, owner, mode, or anything like that. So it's important to note the template module is going to look for the file you define as source in the current directory from where the playbook is run. So you can define the full path if it's somewhere else, right? So actually, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make a folder and I'm gonna call it templates. And I'm gonna create a file and call it index.html.j2. Right. All right. And then we're gonna copy. This is what they want us to copy. Right. We're gonna put it in there. Oh wait, gotta insert. Paste that in there. All right. So I'm actually going to deviate from the documentation a little bit just to show you a little bit more variable usage, right? So within a J2 template, I told you I can define variables, right? So let's see, we can have a title variable, right? So Ansible is going to apply this template, but it's also going to use the variable I defined for title to when it applies this template, right? So I can go ahead and I can actually, let's go to inventory here. Oh, and I'm only doing case worker 01. So we're gonna do title equals hello, right? So now hello should show up in this index.html file when it gets applied to the NGINX server. So back to the playbook. Template source. Where is this file coming from? So it's in templates in this same directory, index.html.j2. And then where do you want this file to go, right? So we want this to go into var www tutorial index.html. Easy peasy. So before we go any further, let's just go ahead and run this. So case worker 01 is where I want to put that. And the only reason I see us hitting issues is if, because of the stuff I have running on case worker 01, it possibly can't start the NGINX server just because the port's being utilized already, but we'll find out when we go ahead and try to start the service. Oh, we got our first error. What did we get? Could not open lock file. Are you root? Okay, so this is good. Actually, this is a learning lesson. So it's not installing because I need root permissions to do an apt install. And the way we solve this in Ansible is in your play, you can go ahead and you can type become true, right? And what this is going to do is it's going to tell Ansible, yes, please sudo before you run these commands or while you run these commands, right? And then when I go ahead and run this, I can do a capital -K, and that is going to ask me for my become password. And now we should be able to run with sudo, so it should install. If not, I may have just, yeah, okay. Well, no, we're still gathering facts, but if this doesn't work, I think it's this part right here that I messed up. The become part, become true. Actually, let me. Become plugins. Yeah, so I think it's working. Yep, there we go. So we've installed NGINX. We created the tutorial folder, and we copied index.html. So now, if real quick, if I SSH over to case worker 01, and I sudo cat var tutorial index.html, we should see the hello in the title section. And we do, see? Hello, right there. Boom. All right, so let's continue on through here. So we accomplished that. Setting up virtual host. So they want us to create another directory. So there's different ways we can go about this. let's see here. So we need to cd to Etsy and make another file. Okay, easy. We can use another template, right? So we'll grab this right here. We'll go back here. We'll make another file. And it's gonna be tutorial, because that's what they want us to name it, .j2. Oh, we'll paste that in there. Cool. All right, we'll go ahead and save that. Come back over to inventory. Oh no, playbook. Where's my playbook? Yep. All right. We can actually, instead of having to repeat the template module twice, right? So I could copy this and then just change the source and destination to match that other file. Or I could change this to, hang on, got a source, or no, item.source, right? So we can do it with items, and you're about to be introduced to that. And I can do item.destination. We'll get rid of that. Oh, too far. Oh, I don't want that. Get rid of all that. No, not destination. I'm getting a little overzealous here, spelling things all the way out. Item.dest, right? So we're going to use this special thing that you can use with most modules called with items. So I've defined item.source and item.destination. So now I can come over here and I can say source templates. This was index.html.j2, and then destination var www tutorials. What time is it? Okay, I gotta end this soon. Tutorials index.html. And then I can also define my second source. So I can define a list of sources and destinations here, right? Instead of repeating the module, I can simply do a loop through this with, like a with items loop is what this is. So this is going to be templates, tutorial.j2. Feel like I did that wrong. Yep. Okay. Comma destination. This is going to go in Etsy NGINX sites dash enabled. Easy peasy. So now we've made our playbook more efficient. That's why I said Ansible. There's a lot you can do in Ansible. You can get very in depth. I'm just showing you some of the tips and tricks here, right? All right. So the last thing we got to do is sudo service NGINX restart. So we just got to restart the NGINX service. So because I'm running systemd, right, I can do restart NGINX. Boop, boop, boop. There is this thing called a service module, actually, where I can define the name of the service, so NGINX, and we can define what we want to do with it, right? Do we want to do we want it started? Do we want it stopped? Do we want it restarted? Right? We want it restarted. Well, we never started it in the first place, I don't think, unless it was installed by default when it got installed. Started by default when it got installed. I don't know, but we're going to restart it anyway, so the changes we made through applying these files can take effect. So we're going to go ahead and I'm on the wrong node. Run that playbook one more time. Our become password, because we need some root privileges, and we got a syntax error. What do we got here? What am I messing with here? You know, like my motto always says, go to where it worked before, right? So I've done this plenty of times. In another project I did, so let's say kube configs. Apparently I didn't do it there. Did I do it here? Let's find out. Let's see, with items. Ah, that's what I did wrong. Okay, so you gotta put the dashes by each of your list items. And this will be a successful test if the service restarts. Ideally, you would go to localhost port 80 because it's the default port you set it up for. Or, you know, it'll still be successful if the service doesn't start, but the reason the service isn't starting is because the port's already being used by something I have installed. So what did we get here? Create index dummy. So it did not. Tutorials does not exist, so I must have made a typo here. Var tutorials. What did they say here? Did I? Tutorial. Yep. Okay, because I'm creating var www tutorial, not tutorials. That was a spelling mistake on my bad. Gathering facts, install NGINX. Okay, because it's already installed it the first time we ran it. Make the directory okay, it already exists. Paste this there, okay, paste that there, because we already did these things. Change for it's always going to change. If you restart a service, it's always going to change because you're always making a change. So we're going to go to Kate's worker 1 again. We're going to sudo systemctl status NGINX. Is it running? It's running. Yeah, so hope you guys got something out of this. I'm going to do more streams where we go more in depth, more tips and tricks. We'll go over different modules, how to achieve certain things. There's, you know, like until you start running in certain situations, there's just things you don't think about. So yeah, let me know if this helped you. Follow me on YouTube and Twitter. I'll be posting this video to YouTube after the 24 hours runs out so I don't get in trouble with Twitch. Have a good one.